Magandang hapon sa ating lahat. Andito tayo sa pinakaunang episodyo ng Usapang Wika, isang serye ng mga diskusyon tungkol sa iba't ibang issue ng iba't ibang wika sa Pilipinas. Ang seryeng ito ay isang paggunita ng Universidad ng Pilipinas, Kolehiyo ng Tacloban, sa Buwan ng Wikang Filipino taong 2021. Ang ating mga paksa sa seryeng ito ay tututok sa iba't ibang wika sa Pilipinas. At ang ating pinakaunang wikang tututukan ay ang wikang Waray, ang wika ng Silangang Visayas, kung saan naroroon ang Universidad ng Pilipinas Tacloban. At ang ating pinakaunang panauhin ay isang manunulat, isang makata na nagsusulat sa Ingles at Waray. Siya ay nakapaglabas na ng 3 koleksyon ng mga tula na ipinalabas ng impresa ng Universidad ng Pilipinas. Ang kanyang pinakahuli ay may pamagat na Poems from Ground Zero at ito ay nakasulat sa Ingles at malapit na ilabas. Antabayanan natin yan. Noong taong 1997, siya ay nanalo ng pinakaunang premyo sa pangdaigdigang patimpalak na ginanap at pinamunuan ng Thornton Literary Agency ng Estados Unidos. At noong taong 2011, siya naman ay nagawaran ng residensya bilang manunulat sa El Guna, Red Sea. Sa tingin ko ito ay sa Ehipto, kung saan nakumpleto niya ang isang koleksyon ng mga tula. Ang tulang ito na nasa wikang Waray at pinamagatang Taburusan Dagat ay nanalo ng National Book Award for Waray Poetry sa taong 2018. Ang ating panauhin ay nagturo sa loob ng halos 40 taon sa Universidad ng Pilipinas, Tacloban, at siya rin ay gumanap sa iba't ibang opisina, hindi lang dito sa kolehiyo, kundi sa NCCA National Commission for Culture and the Arts. Ang ating panauhin ngayon, at ito ay aking ikinalulugod na ipakilala sa inyo, ay ang amain naming lahat. Ito ay si Doktor. Ito ay si Dr. Victor N. Sugbo. Palakpakan nating lahat si Sir Sugbo. Kahit virtual lang. Magandang hapon sa ating lahat. Nandito tayo sa isang serye ng mga diskusyong tumatalakay sa iba't ibang issue sa mga wika ng bansa. Ito ang Usapang Wika na isang paggunita ng Universidad ng Pilipinas, Kolehiyo ng Tacloban sa Buwan ng Wikang Filipino 2021. Ating panauhin ngayon ay isa sa mga kinikilalang haligi ng pagsusulat at panitikang Waray sa kasalukuyan. Siya ay isang manunulat, makata sa Ingles at Waray. Siya ay nakapaglabas na ng 3 koleksyon ng mga tula na inilabas ng impresa ng Universidad ng Pilipinas. Ang pinakahuli rito ay ang Poems from Ground Zero na nasa Ingles at malapit nang ilabas. Antabayanan natin yan. Siya noong taong 1997 ay nanalo ng pinakaunang premyo sa patimpalak sa isang pangdaigdigang patimpalak sa pagsusulat ng siday o ng tula na pinamunuan ng Thornton Literary Agency ng Estados Unidos. At noong 2011, siya ay nabigyan ng residensya sa El Guna, Red Sea, kung saan ay nakumpleto niya, nabuo ang isang koleksyon ng mga tula. Ang kanyang koleksyon sa Waray, na may pamagat na Taburusan Dagat, ay nanalo ng National Book Award for Waray Poetry sa taong 1918. Siya ay nagturo ng halos 40 taon sa Universidad ng Pilipinas, Tacloban, at siya rin ay gumanap sa iba't ibang papel sa Universidad ng Pilipinas, Tacloban, sa Division of Humanities partikular, at sa iba't ibang opisina ng NCCA. Ang ating panauhin ngayon ay walang iba kundi ang aming amain. Si Dr. Victor N. Sugbo. Palakpakan natin. Kahit virtual lang. Mo pay nga kulop, sir. Salamat ang imo baga pag-abuyon nga amon ka makahuruhimang raw yan ang kulop. Dahil dito sa Usapang Wika ay pag-uusapan natin iba't ibang mga issue tungkol sa mga wika ng bansa. Unahin natin yung mga isyung tungkol sa waray. Una sa lahat, sir, anong masasabi ninyo doon sa parang issue baga tungkol sa termino ng ginagamit sa pagtawag sa wika? Kasi may iba't ibang pananaw dyan. Ito raw ay hindi waray kasi medyo nakabababa ng tingin. Yung iba naman pinipili yung Binisaya o Leyte Samar o Samar-Leyte. Ano kayo bilang gumagamit nito at nagsusulat sa wikang ito, ano sa tingin ninyo ang meron bang tama na termino?
First, I would just like to clarify, that because I don't feel secure with my proficiency in Filipino, I will be answering your questions, I think, most of the time in English, and maybe shift to Filipino when I feel comfortable. Okay? Now,
ayos lang yun, sir.
Anyway, this is also, English also is part of Filipino Wika. Wika.
Totoo yan.
Filipino. Isa yan sa mga wika ng Pilipino in the first place. Okay, so anyway, people have been calling the language in different ways, like winaray, like waray-waray. It has also been called Bisaya waray. All this, however, show the perceptions of people about their language. Now, the waray term was used by a group of scholars. The use of the word waray to denote the language began with some of the researchers of the Leyte Summer Studies of the Divine Word University. They were the ones who started the use, who used the word waray to denote the language. Okay, so because of that, and because it was accepted in the academic world, because many papers about waray were published in the journal Leyte Samar, I had to use the same word in my own papers, and I did not anymore use winaray or waray-waray or anything else, because it officially established the name of the language, the official name of the language, and this was also accepted by the linguists in Diliman as the language spoken, to denote the language spoken in Samar, Leyte, and outlying islands. So that is how it is. I find it funny when you use the word winaray, because winaray means to speak this particular phrase or sentence in waray. So it is more of a verb. It is not a noun. Now, when you say waray-waray, you make reduplication in our language diminishes the term waray, because it trivializes, because it's waray-waray only. Yes. Whereas if you say waray, you focus the person's mind on the term itself. But when you say waray-waray gadla, like it's just something that you do anytime you want, but it has no significance. Now, when you say, akong gininakan, waray-waray, malagihap ito niya, the two-word phrase, waray-waray, only diminishes or turns the language into a diminutive.
Yes, sir, because it happens, for example, with nawutawo, not exactly atawo, only nawutawo, malay-balay, something like that. The diminishing. So, so yun, sir, isa yun sa mga issue ng waray, yung sa termino pa lang na ganyan. Pero sabi nyo nga, ginagamit naman siya sa mga, lalong-lalo na noong sa Divine Word University nga. Pero itong mga usaping pangwika na may kinalaman ang waray, ay medyo mas malawak pa siya. Masasabi nating pangbuong bansa. Halimbawa nga dito sa usapin ng wikang pambansa, saan kaya natin mailulugar ang waray? Meron ba siyang pwesto na kanyang kinabibilangan kung saan siya nararapat lamang?
Okay, it is in terms of laws, no? The language waray, Cebuano, Filipino, Kapampangan, and all the others, no, are considered major languages. They are even in linguists, I think, and even our documents say that they are major languages.
Yeah, there are like 8 of them, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, there are 8 major languages in the Philippines. So, in terms of its relation to the national language, they are placed not at par with the national language because they are major, while Tagalog-based Filipino is the language for national use. So, and our major languages have only geographical, the use of these languages are used to the geographical location of the places where the speech communities are located.
At itong ang waray sa Region 8, silang Visayas. At kung titingnan rin kasi sir, yung kasaysayan ng lalong-lalo yung pagsusulat sa waray, panitikan. Masasabi nga yung tinatawag doon na yung golden age of waray literature, especially yung waray poetry, ay talagang isang siglo na yung nakararaan, lalong-lalo na yung tinatag nga itong sanghiran sang Binisaya. Pero kung papansinin nga yung kasaysayan niya, mula doon medyo bumaba yung kanyang produksyon ng mga gawain at maging produksyon ng mga manunulat. Bakit kaya naging ganito yung kasaysayan ng...
There was a shift in interest since that time of Lucente and the other writers. This was when Lucente and the others were writing in Waray. It was at the time when during the American occupation in the 1900s. And then the Americans had this policy of orienting the Filipinos towards American culture and all this, no?
Yeah. So benevolent assimilation, is that?
Yes. For this reason, but at any rate, the fervor that the group of Waray writers gave to the language continued because they did not consider English as a threat at the time, because they came from the 1800s where the Spanish language was used, but allowed the local writers to continue writing in their languages. And with the coming of the Americans, there was early in the 1900s, it was not yet a threat. It began to be perceived as a threat when the local newspapers started changing the number of pages, had devoted more pages to English and lessen the number of pages for Waray.
Aside from
the fact that the Waray speakers the young Waray speakers had a low regard for their language, the mass media were not warm to the language itself. Example, the periodicals with the emphasis, with the shift to English, reduce the number of pages in the newspapers for Waray. From, let us say, if before there were 5 pages for English and 4 pages for Waray, this time it was only, Waray language was given only 2 pages until it had 1, until finally disappeared. That alone indicates the attitude of the Waray speakers to their language. That's an example of how people lost, siguro, how lost their interest, gradually lost their interest in the language and in the literature of their language. So, that is why there was no literature written between the 70s up to the 80s. There was no new literature.
Nabasahan ko gihapon sa imo sinurat nga to something weird happened on the way to nation. I always use that in my classes kay nakahatag siya itong kuan baga kasayuran kung kay ano nga nasugad ato mga pinulungan an usa nimo nga rason didto baga economics ring pa nimo may da. It's because when you speak in Filipino, especially in English, it opens up many opportunities for growth, for jobs, for whatever. So meron may da siya kuan economic factor. It's not necessarily just because the people were not really interested, pero dahil pero tungod kay ini nga lingwahe ini nga English pananglitan pati nalagya po ng Tagalog nakahatag sinduro dako nga mga kahigayunan para sa mga katawhan nga kapag trabaho kundiin.
Kita mo lang itong Filipino, hain man itong kwarta dida.
So kwarta na sir. Money is the easy.
Kung matabaho ka newspaper dito sa Manila, movies, television, may kwarta iya. Pero on a wider scale, hindi rin good iya. Tapos, hindi naman ang Filipino liwat the language of scientific knowledge. Hindi liwat. Hindi language for social mobility. Only for snub appeal.
For snub appeal. Kuan sir ito, pansapong iton resume, mga language skills. Baga na kasapong-sapong gadman dida.
Amo ito, we were talking about the economic value of Filipino in Diliman in my master's courses, and we really found little economic value for it.
Okay, that's interesting.
Tapos and we were discussing that in the early 70s pa. Like it was already like that. That's why siguro we were forced to learn English during my time because our government and our educators found the language to be our medium for social mobility, for economic livelihood, whatever. Today, I have a niece who earns English because she teaches the language to Chinese and Japanese.
Yes. Okay, siguro, sir.
If you use Tagalog to the Japanese, they will not enroll.
Yeah. Siguro, sir, nasa rin ka nga iyo ito nahingadayan at ito mga dekada 70 pa. Pero, bisan ada, yan na, pagka-adi, siya lagi hapon na kay may da mga, ito nga mga kumpanya nga baga ito, bringing people abroad, Filipinos abroad.
Yes.
It ira usang nga baga susun, itaton kuno sistema sa itaton pangiskwelahan, kay damo kuno taton kuno mga extra mga subjects nga diri kuno nagagamit pananglitan kuno nga Filipino nakasapong lang kuno tuition, pero when you go outside the Philippines wala man kuno iton gamit. So bangin to some extent masiring lagi hapon nato nga aniyo na huro himang rawan ng una ada lagi hapon ito na hastayan na ng mga irisgutan.
Masisina lagi apaton usa nga nanguroyagin monolingualist.
Sir, kay masing manadto nga it's not about monolingualism, it's about your regional people fighting the Tagalog. It's not really, ba?
I don't think so. It has really to do with our kind of education. We also developed an attitude towards Filipino.
So that's interesting. Ito naman, sir, kasi nga medyo tinitingnan pa natin yung pangkasaysayang saliks dito sa waray language at dito nga sa pangkalahatang issue, political, yung matatawag natin sa bansa. Kasi ito nga, pinadala ko to sa'yo, hindi ko alam kung anong isasagot mo rito. Kasi nga, itong si Virgilio S. Almario na isa siya sa mga nagsusulong nitong Wikang Filipino, ay sinabi nga niya na bakit daw, ang isang rason daw kung bakit hindi masyado pa ganun kalaganap ang Wikang Filipino sa buong bansa ay dahil may umaayaw pa rin daw dito sa mga mithiing magkaisa yung buong bansa at itong mga regionalista raw, mga nasa mga rehiyon na nagsasalita ng iba't ibang wika ay ginagamit yung Ingles para kalabanin daw itong Imperial Manila na sinasabi na sila law ay parang nagkakaisa para awayin ang Filipino at ang ginagawa nilang ito ay parang sumasalungat doon sa mithiing magkaisa ang Pilipinas sa ilalim ng iisang pambansang wika. Ano sa tingin ninyo? Anong panahon niyo dito?
I think it is a false. It's a false statement that if we turn the Philippines into a monolingual country, there will be unity. and if we start if we launch a project that would erase the major languages in the Philippines, and everybody starts talking in Filipino, there will be national unity. I don't think so. Look at other countries that are very monolingual. They are restive. They are restless. In fact, yes. They do not have unity at all. Now, monolingualism will not really prosper in this country, whether we like it or not, because the speech communities of the major languages are intact. They are spoken in places where the people are, where the speech community is there.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot stop people from talking in Waray, especially in Leyte and Samar, because about 4.2 million speak the language in this region. And if there will probably that the people in this region might shift only to Tagalog-based Filipino if there will be an oppressive government like whoever
North Korea,
like a dictatorship or something that would force everybody to speak Filipino, but that is not. But the speaking of Filipino has to be complemented by the use of the language in what we call the state apparatuses.
Yes. Ideological apparatuses.
Yes.
That's so Alto-Syrian. Is that, yeah, Alto-Sir?
Yes.
Yes. Ito naman, sir, paano ito? Kasi, yun nga, yun yung nabanggit ni Almario at sinasabi niya na yung pagkamatay raw o paghina ng iba't ibang wika sa bansa ay hindi naman daw dahil sa Filipino. Iyon daw ay dahil ang mga tagapagsalita mismo ay hindi raw tinatangkilik at isinusulong yung kanilang mga sariling wika. Totoo kaya ito, lalong-lalo na sa silangang Visayas? Hindi ba natin sinusulong yung Waray?
Lukewarm ang attitude ng mga Waray sa
ano yung lukewarm? Parang 50-50 lang yun.
Parang hindi talaga sila receptive to the idea of propagating the language in literature.
Bakit kaya, sir?
Okay, it can be because they look at their own language as inferior. There are still people like your age who look at their own language as inferior, as incapable of expressing the most complex feelings, for example.
Which is not true.
Another is that our mass media do not promote it except in KYVL and in some maybe a few hours in Radyo Bombo and a few
Mhm.
hours in the other stations. But anyway, it only shows that the desire to make the language even, no, the desire to promote the language is not that really, it's not that strong as when you, but I think if you go to Samar, which is a predominantly Waray speech community, you will be able to see that kind of fervor for the language. You will be able,
Mm.
but not in Tacloban, primarily because Tacloban is not a purely Waray country,
Why is
because
that?
this is a migrant society. People from different parts of the Philippines stay here, and they speak to each other. Some of them maintain the languages where they came from, and they talk to each other in this, and they shift to Waray when they're talking to a Waray speaker. Some of
Mhm.
them maintain their language. Some Ilonggo families maintain the use of Hiligaynon in at home here, even in our place. So, but
Yes.
anyway, because we are a migrant society, the people in Tacloban, I think, are more open-minded too, and are not very strict, I think, in the use of other languages in the city for communication.
Mhm. O ito sir, kasi yun nga, nabanggit mo na ito yung Tacloban, yung kanyang parang historical and social background. Parang yan dito sa mga katanungan ko, pero parang nasa huli siya, pero itanong ko na lang din. Pero ikaw, kasi tuminungnong ka naman, yung Taclobanon, yung pagkakaintindi ko. So why are you into writing and the promotion of the Waray language? Lalong-lalo na kasi you are very much an English writer yourself. Pero bakit ka andito rin sa Waray na hindi mo lang siya parang iniwan sa bahay, timasa, yung gano'n?
Okay, anyway, my my journey back to writing in Waray was spurred by the fact that I found a need, no, to
Mhm.
to to contribute to the revitalization of the language. Even if so, I thought of writing in Waray with the hope that I could contribute even a little to that
Mhm.
revitalization should the people start using what I wrote, if they
Mhm.
want to use what I wrote. But that is just a small, it's a small contribution that I'm making because the Waray speakers do not really read. Read, read. And then, and also because people here are more interested, I think, in increasing their income,
So
improving
there
their
are economic
income.
economic
Yes,
factors na
yes.
mga ganun. Ito sir, sana nga ba yun? Oo nga, ito isang issue. Parang hindi talaga maiiwasan na yung sa pangkasaysayang salik kasi nga sa iba't ibang bahagi ng bansa, meron nga lalong-lalo yung mga scholar at mga akademiko na may issue talaga ito sa wikang pambansa na ito, lalo na dyan sa Filipino nga kung ano yung kahulugan niya. Isa sa mga sentimiento dyan ay sinasabi nga na dahil itong wikang pambansa ay parang pinapahina, unti-unting pinapatay itong mga regional na wika. Dito sa atin, Leyte Samar, parang may ganun din. Pero, ano kaya sir? Kasi yung iba dito sa atin, hindi alam na dalawa sa mga nagsulong ng wikang pambansa noon, kabilang sila sa komitibang nagsulong sa Tagalog bilang basihan sa wikang pambansa, ay mga Waray. At medyo
Yes.
kilala sila dito sa atin.
Oh.
At sila rin ay kabilang doon, sir, di ba, sa sanghiran ng Binisaya, they were the founders. They were also promoters of the Waray language. So, ano kaya ito sa tingin mo? Justified ba yung, parang may justisya ba yung pag-aayaw sa Tagalog na parang mga Waray din naman yung dalawa sa nagsulong dyan sa wikang pabansang yan?
I think the two Waray policymakers who pushed for the nationalization of Filipino or Tagalog-based Filipino were, I think it was more of an honest desire to have a national language at the time. They did not think of, I think they did not foresee this policy as a potential threat to the major languages in the Philippines. It was only later, when the new generation came, that this threat was seen to exist already. But if we look at the use of English in the Philippines, we have used English for more than 100 years. It also became a major language during my time because we were forced to learn English from the grades up to college. There was little Filipino. There were one or two Filipino courses, and we were not required. They were not required in our Yes. Okay. Because of that, we became very proficient in English. And
how about in Spanish?
Spanish was also like Filipino. It was for a time during my period, it was a required course in English, but we did not really. It was not a language that we enjoyed speaking outside the classroom. We only used Spanish for purposes because it was required by our teachers. And so we were not really interested in internalizing the language. We were only interested in getting the grades. So despite the 100 years of existence of English in the Philippines, it has not succeeded in erasing the major languages.
Okay.
The same is also true with Filipino. 50 years, I think for 50 years, the use of Filipino, there was the growing desire to use Filipino both in the mass media and in our educational system, and it has not succeeded in making us monolingual either. And if ever the young Filipinos use Filipino, and you hear this being used in malls, it is more for snub appeal and for class. So,
I like the snub appeal.
May I beg your pardon? It is because they want to show class and for snub appeal.
I like that snub appeal. Pero ito nga, sir, dahil nga dyan sa snub appeal ng Filipino, may mga, kahit dito sa atin, medyo may tumataas yung kilay kung nakarinig ng nagtatagalog na sabing, ano ba yan? Bakit ganyan? Pero ito, sir, para kasi hindi lang sa usapan natin ngayon, kahit doon sa ibang mga konteksto, minsan nga, parang nagkakabali-baliktad yung gamit. Interchangeability baga ng terminong Filipino at saka Tagalog. May mga ibang nagsasabi they are two different things. Lalong-lalo na doon, they would point out to laws, that the law says that Filipino is a combination of the different languages of the Philippines and English and Spanish. Pero, parang sa kolokyal, sa pang-araw-araw na buhay, ganun ba kaklaro, kalinaw itong kaibahan o mga kahulugan ng Filipino at ng Tagalog at kung saan sila humihiwalay sa isa't isa? Kasi halimbawa dito sa Leyte Samar, parang when we say Tagalog, it's synonymous with Filipino.
whether we like it or not, even linguists say that the Filipino language that we use is really Tagalog.
Tagalog.
In fact, its grammatical structure is based on the Tagalog language. And so you cannot really blame people from saying that that Tagalog is the national language, because it is the basis of the national language. Now, there was that concept of an amalgamated Filipino language, which means where will you amalgamate the national language? You can only do that at the morphological level, on the use of words. And I don't think
anong ibig sabihin ng morphological, sir?
Morphology has to do with word formation.
Okay.
So it is at this level when we can do morphological borrowings from English, from Waray. We can do this and transfer them to the Tagalog-based Filipino. But after more than 20 years, this has not happened.
Yes.
Because if you use, for example, if you mix, because you will mix now this time Filipino and a Waray term, it sounds awkward. Although I have seen a Hiligaynon laden Filipino as spoken by Dr. Leoncio Derriada. It was yes, it was a beautiful variety of Filipino.
Saan yan, sir? Para natin magawang halimbawa. Sir Derriada was a very prolific writer in different languages. Parang he wrote in 5 different languages, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Totoo nga, sir, kasi yung sinabi mo, parang awkward yung paghahalo-halo kasi ito nga may bagong asignatura sa sistema ng Universidad ng Pilipinas, itong Wika isa, at doon sa kanilang mga layunin umano ng kurso, yung pinakahuli, ito yung sinasabi, basahin ko, nakabubuo ng individual o kolektibong pagsusuri, pagpapasya, pagpaplano, at pagkilos para sa pag-uswag ng wikang Filipino. Pinapabasa ko yan sa mga estudyante ko. Pagdating nila dyan sa pag-uswag, natatawa sila kasi...
Yes, because it sounds, it comes out like a sore thumb. The word
parang pinilit.
Parang, it seems forced.
Yun nga.
The word uswag is forced, appears forced.
Yun nga, natatawa sila. Tapos, yun nga, parang binabanggit ko na lang na yung dito ba, sir, parang lumalabas kasi na para siya isang uri ng, sorry for the word, yung tokenismo, this is a token. Parang isiningit lang siya, parang sabihin may Filipino siya kasi kumuha.
It's a token gesture.
So, yes, pero kasi may nagpanukala, baka tayo panoorin dito at tayo ay mapagalitan. Pero ito nga, sir, sabi mo nga, yung Tagalog dito sa atin may snob appeal, tapos yung mga ganyan. Ano naman yung tanaw natin sa Ingles? Lalo na sabi nga ni Almario, at ito rin ay napapansin, may mga kakilala akong halimbawa mga kaklase sa elementary at saka nung mataas na paaralan na doon sila nagkolehiyo sa Maynila. Sinasabi raw ng kanilang mga guro, mga maestra na magaling daw silang mag-Ingles. Tapos parang nagiging kaakibat ng kanilang pangalang bilang Bisaya, na kapag Bisaya sila magaling mag-Ingles. So ano naman yung tingin natin sa Ingles? Bakit sinasabing mas malapit tayo daw sa Ingles kaysa sa Tagalog?
That is because our educational system made us closer to English than to Filipino, particularly during my time. So, on the other hand, during my time, if you are who speaks good English, it assigned you to a particular social class. You were cultured, highly educated, and you're cultured, highly educated, and you belong to a higher social class.
Oh.
And even I think today, probably that is still the attitude of our
Yes.
countrymen, of our paisanos in this region.
Paisanos. Oh, medyo totoo naman. Kasi yun nga sinasabing ito ay mga wikang ng mga elite, wika ng mga bourgeois, burgis, mga ganyan
Yes.
na mga termino. Pero yun nga sir, kahit kayo nag-Ingles, lumaki kayo sa isang ano bang tawag nito, sa isang kalikurang maka-Ingles at kahit doon sa kolehiyo sa pag-aaral. Pero yun nga, nagsulong din kayo ng pagsusulat sa sariling wika natin. Ano sa tingin ninyo, sa inyong medyo, sa waray, sa inyong pagbansay-bansay, sa tansya ninyo, ano na kaya yung narating ng inyong mga pagpupursige at ng iba pang mga scholar para mapreserba yung sarili nating wika? How do you assess that?
Could you please, you tend to ask very long questions that sometimes are difficult to
Hindi naman.
follow. No, but usually, but that's why I would like the question to be repeated because it's quite.
Yun lang naman sir, paano ano yung tansya ninyo o paano mo maa-assess yung nagawa ng ninyo at ng iba ring pang mga scholar na ipreserba at isulong yung sarili? Ano nang naabot niya sa kasalukuyan?
In my case, I can't only talk about what I did, no? In my case, I was describing what was happening to Waray, the Waray language and Waray literature in relation to the national language policy and how it was marginalized and how the language was minorized. Minorized from major to minor. The minorization of Waray can be seen by us, can be felt by us, but we do not mention the term minorization of Waray because it contrasts with major. And
proseso siya kasi minorization.
Minorization is really a social process. It is more of a cultural and social process.
Saan ito nagaganap? Dito lang sa atin o kahit sa pambansang usapin?
I think it also affects the other major languages in the Philippines.
The minorization.
This is what I have noticed. I was running a workshop with a group of Kapampangan writers, who were aspiring writers. One of them, I hope this does not become a national. This conversation does not become a national. Will not be broadcast
available nationally?
Yes, because
hindi natin alam. Maaaring maging viral ito. Hayaan niyo na, sir.
But anyway, you will edit this, no? But I am just going to be very
about
this because my observation is that if you are a multilingual individual in the Philippines, we are forced to become multilingual primarily because the educational system forces us to learn English and to learn Filipino, and outside the school, our first language. The problem here is that because of the way we teach Filipino and English, our multilingual compatriots do not have a high level of proficiency in any of these languages. Yes. They cannot speak English properly. They cannot talk they cannot speak Filipino proficiently, They cannot also speak Waray proficiently.
Medyo totoo. Hindi ako sasalungat dyan, sir.
And in that sense, how do you propagate the literature of your language if your own compatriots cannot speak Waray correctly?
O ito, sir, para kasing may itong multilingualism, it should be an asset supposedly. Pero parang sinasabi mo na because of that, parang hindi nakatututok sa kung alin man at walang lumago. Parang a jack of, a jack of many trades, a master of none.
Yes.
Parang ganun siya.
That is really, what is happening now is a realization of the jack of all trades.
A master of none. Pero ito, sir, ano yung mga banta ngayon sa wikang Waray? Banta pa rin ba itong wikang pabansa o nadagdagan siya o napalitan ng iba?
The threat is still there. It still exists, but it is because of President Duterte's presidency, because of President Duterte's presence in Malacanang. Filipino as a language has not really been used to. It has not really been encouraged to unlike Marcos, who used Filipino to
address the nation,
to make people to bridge the relationship between an Ilocano and a Waray. President Duterte has not done anything to do has not done any effort in that regard. But when he speaks Cebuano, that also encourages us to probably use the language too. Because it looks like Duterte has unofficially declared Cebuano as another national language.
So what is your take on that? Is that a good thing or a bad thing for the other languages?
If you talk about unity, it's not a threat to unity. It is not. It only helps the speakers, the Cebuano speech community, to probably take pride in the language and maybe to work to promote the language also among themselves. And it does not. And even if we speak different languages, I think there are other ways or there are other means where we can express our nationalism.
Yun, not only limited to speaking a particular language.
Yes. Reducing nationalism to the national language is narrow-mindedness.
So that also means na kahit tayo Ingles ng Ingles, hindi nababawasan yung ating pagka-Pilipino.
Yes.
So, dahil dyan sa nabanggit ninyo na ito nga yung Cebuano, paggamit siya ni Duterte, at medyo sumusulong nga siya, nakausap nga na rin natin yung isa nating panauhin, si Sir John Wariap, na tungkol naman sa Cebuanong Wika. At sinasabi nga niya, napapansin nga rin natin na sa panahon ngayon, lalong umuusad yung wikang Cebuano. Nandiyan na siya sa pelikula, sa mga soap opera, at maging yung mga kantang Cebuano ay pinapatugtog na rin daw sa Maynila. Sa Waray naman, sir, ano yung estado ng Waray ngayon at saan siya tutungo sa hinaharap? Far future, near future? Or may future ba?
There is, but I do not have a definite picture about that future.
Yes.
Because
if only we can.
I do not know what the writers are doing in the region, and I also do not know what the speech communities of Waray are doing. Because if if the people really love their language, they would be forming organizations, not only organizations, but they be putting out of publications. Probably if they do not have money, they can publish works in the internet anyway.
Ayun nga. May dalawa na ng katanungan dito, sir, pero medyo madadagdagan ng isa pa dahil dyan sa sinabi nyo. Kasi nga, itong napapansin ko halimbawa sa Western Visayas, yung sabi mo nga, yung mga manunulat, they form associations and they frequently, it's a yearly basis. Ganon din sa Cebuano, meron silang Cebuano Study Center, napaka-prolific ng kanilang mga gawa at sulatin. Ito sa atin, sir, bakit parang wala? Kasalanan ba? Sino may kasalanan nito? Kabilang ba tayo dyan sa dapat sisihin?
Yes. Dati it was the work of Divine Word University.
Yes, totoo yan. Ano nangyari doon?
The closure of Divine Word University after Drilon declared after a labor dispute.
Yes, 1990s, early 1990s.
Yes, Drilon closed the university. No one took up that particular space. No university in the region has taken that particular space where Divine Word University was working for the development of the language and the culture of Leyte and But right now there is one alumnus of Tacloban who is doing something about summer studies. They are offering now a course on summer studies, and the university has also established a museum and a library for Waray studies.
Bakit hindi siya, sir, bakit hindi yung UP Tacloban yung pumuno dyan sa the void that was left by the closure?
They're not yet interested at the moment.
Ganun ba? Bakit parang may interest ngayon? Pero
I do not know. I do not know what spurred your interest in this matter.
Ikaw kaya yun, di ba? Kabilang ka dyan sa mga nagpaalab ng mga damdaming makawaray. Tapos, pero ito na, sir, dalawang katanungan na lang. Isang layunin ng wikang pabansa ang makabuo ng wikang kumuha at nakapaghalo-halo ng mga salita mula sa iba't ibang wika sa bansa, lakip din ng Ingles at Espanyol. Sa tingin ninyo, paano makatutulong ang waray para sa paglambo ng wikang Filipino?
In that concept naman, this is what I said. This is what I said before. Na ito, they're talking of the national language that is an amalgam. An amalgam of different languages. What can we contribute except our words, our vocabulary? Kaya Oswag is now in the Filipino language because that's one. And then in Diliman they use the word kalibutan in a program. So I said, so this word has invaded this word is now present in Filipino, kalibutan. I don't know if they understand the other meaning of kalibutan, because I think kalibutan in our community means consciousness.
Consciousness. Yes. Awareness.
The world. Yes, awareness.
That is true. Kahit nga rin sa UP Diliman, in fairness sa kanila, meron silang mga balay alumni, balay something.
Yes.
Bagamat sinasabi nila na yung balay na yun, na hindi galing Kiligay nun daw yun. Sabi ko, okay, pero ginagamit rin namin yun. Oo, so, ay sinasabi, pwede naman siyang lumago, itong wikang Filipino at meron tayong sariling kontribusyon. So, ayun, meron pa ba kayo, sir, nais na iparating na mga mensahe sa ating mga manonood at tagapakinig ngayon? Maliban doon sa, uunahan na kita, ating antabayanan yung paglabas ng collection mo sa poems from Ground Z.
English yun.
Okay lang yan. That's okay. Poetry and literature is a universal language. Diba, sir? Ano ba?
But anyway, I think the community, the large Waray speech community should provide space to its artists, not only in literature but also visual arts.
Visual arts.
The different speech communities, our speech communities in Samar-Leyte should provide the spaces for them so that people will be encouraged to use their language, to use their creative skills and creative imagination in producing something for the people to use. Tapos they can, since people do not read newspapers anymore, maybe they could establish online newspapers where they have pages for Waray news, for Waray literature, for Waray works of art and literature, and maybe I am not really sure how this will.
Do we need institutions, sir,
moving
for
in
that?
The region? Yes. Ano?
Do we need institution for that, for these things to keep moving? Halimbawa, itong mga educational institutions or the government?
Yes. And then one of the things I would like is for the government to institute courses in our different major and in the regions that speak the major languages, to institute courses on literature and language, maybe.
In the local language?
Yes, in the local languages.
We're going to do that, sir. Watch out ka. Hopefully.
There was an attempt to do this during the time of Dr. Is this from LaSalle, Dr. Isagani Cruz?
Isagani Cruz.
But this was, I do not know which group attempted to disregard this particular project to promote the local languages and the literatures of the different regions.
Ayun nga, sir, nabanggit mo yung mga artist promotion. Ito nga pala, sa likod ko, promote natin ito. Ito ay tinta ni Ma'am Dulce Cuna Anacion. Ito yan, painting. Sana may pakita ko sa kabuuan. Meron din kayong, sir, sa likod ninyo. Sino may gawa niyan?
Gawa yan sa Iligan.
Okay. Ano yan, token sa iyo?
Gawa ng
Bigay.
Artist sa Iligan na I think Muslim yata. Tapos binigay lang ito sa akin.
Yes, kasi nga malimit ka doon sa Iligan for the Iligan National Writers Workshop. Salamat, sir. Maraming salamat sa lahat ng pagpapaunlak. Damo good sir nga salamat sa imo baga pag-abuyon nga amon kay kahimang raw ading pulok para ini nga amon usapang wika. Damo nga salamat. Ayun nga, maraming salamat talaga kay Dr. Sugbo at pinaunlakan niya ang ating imbitasyon. Kahit na siya ay medyo maraming ginagawa. He's all over the place, sa totoo lang. Pero talagang pinagbigyan niya tayo. At itong ating Usapang Wika ay magkakaroon ng 5 episodyo. Ito yung pinakauna. At ang susunod naman natin, yun ngayon, yung paksa natin ay Waray. Ang susunod natin ay mananatili pa rin tayo sa Kabisayaan. At yun ay ang paksa tungkol sa wikang Cebuano na meron ding maraming tagapagsalita dito sa Silangang Visayas. At ating makakasama ang isa ring manunulat sa wikang Cebuano naman na si Ginoong John Wariap. Antabayanan natin yan sa susunod na linggo. Maraming salamat at kita tayong muli.